So, good morning or good night, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to another Is It That Bad episode where we take a look at an album that, well, on this case, this is a new album, so we don't know, we haven't seen the reviews yet. At least I haven't tried to see, but it's a band that I didn't know that needed a comeback. So, the band that we're going to talk about today is Alien Ant Farm, and this is their new album. Mantras. So yeah, this is a name that I hadn't heard in a long time. So guys, I want to ask you a question. Who asked for this reunion?
I don't know.
I'm like, I don't think anyone was like, yeah, we need Alien Ant Farm. And I'm this cover, I like it. It kind of looks like Deadpool a little bit, the ant a little bit, but yeah. So for those of you that don't know Alien Ant Farm, they were back in the heyday of the late 90s when, you know, all the Papa Roach and all that band. I think they even toured with Papa Roach. And they were very big because they had a cover of Smooth Criminal by Michael Jackson. But I actually had that album, Anthology. And there were some good tracks in it. But I think what happened with that band is, first of all, the name of the band, Alien Ant Farm. That's a terrible band name. If I like, why would you name your band that? Because even Papa Roach, it sounds cooler, but Alien Ant Farm, it sounds like a band of dorks, like with some a. I'm like, here's my Alien Ant Farm. I don't know, but I did have that anthology, and it had another single that probably people won't remember called "The Movies," which I thought was a great track. And I actually had that album, but I think they came out uh too little too late, and I don't think they ever match like they just had that success and then everyone forgot about them. And I don't know how long it has been, but I think it's been more than 15 years since they put out a record. So we're here to talk about this record, and you know the drill. We have the 3 rounds. The first round, we'll talk about our first impressions listening to this. Obviously, we all listen to this Friday because it's new. Then we will pick 3 songs that we think are the worst. And then at the final round, we'll give it a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down, and we'll give our final thoughts on the album. So let's start today. We'll start JC, then Tom, then Nick, then me. So JC, your initial thoughts on this one? Okay, so we'll give our initial thoughts. So JC, what are your initial thoughts on this one?
So basically, I knew about this band. I never really listened to them. I never bought any of their albums. The ones I knew was the Michael Jackson "Smooth Criminal." It's one of those songs that was always on TV. It would always like come back on playlists. Like whenever I'm listening to YouTube or Spotify, it would always like just come back. So that song I knew very well. Then there was the other song "Movies," which I knew. I think I liked it back then. I guess it's kind of a good song, but I never really got into this band that much. I really know those 2 songs. I might know other ones if I like listen to some of their singles, but those are the ones I knew. And I really like wasn't anticipating much about this album because it's just one of those bands I kind of had forgotten about. Like you were saying before, they were part of that group with like Papa Roach and those bands from the 2000s. Now, listening to this album, my first impression, I think they're trying to sound modern. I think they're also trying to sound like some popular bands from the 2000s. Like when we get to the next round, I made some notes and I jotted down some names, like some names like Linkin Park and Chevelle were a few that came up. But I think they're trying to do like 2 things. They're trying to like sound relevant, but also bring back that 2000 sound. So that's all I'll say for now for my first impressions. Yeah.
Okay. So what about you, Tom?
Yeah, I think I would pretty much echo what JC just said, really. I only knew this band for 2 songs, Smooth Criminal and Movies. neither track I particularly loved, but nor did I really dislike those songs either. I thought they were just, catchy, memorable. But I never felt a particular desire to really dig into this band's albums at the time. Of course, when this band were big, it was really before everyone was downloading music and streaming music a lot. So it was still in that era. So I wouldn't have had as easy access probably to their albums back then as well. And I think their time is sort of, I feel like with this band, their time, their heyday, it's unlikely they're gonna, it's pretty much certain that they're not gonna get the same level of probably popularity or commercial success again now. But maybe I'll be proved wrong. But that's unlikely to happen, I think. So I mean, my impression of this album was, I will say this at this stage in the episode, it just wasn't really actually totally what I was expecting. When we do videos for this series, I have a certain expectation usually about what I'm going to get, and I think this is one of the only times where I've really been pretty surprised by what I've listened to. But I don't really want to. If I elaborate any more on that, I feel like it really gives away my final verdict. So
Spoiler.
I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to stick with that. Stick with the rules. But yeah, it was different. I think, like JC says, this reminds me of a lot of the 2000s. That 2000, like it could have come out and in that era and not have sounded out of place. They remind me a bit of like maybe Hoobastank a little bit, just a touch.
Or Incubus.
And bands like that. Yeah, Incubus. Yeah. So yeah, those were my early thoughts.
Yeah. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I remember when Smooth Criminal came out, I was a fan of that song. Actually, I don't know if I was actually really familiar with the original Michael Jackson song when that cover came out. So it was a little bit new to me when, I knew a lot of Michael Jackson's hits, but maybe not that one in particular. But I liked that Smooth Criminal track. I liked Movies. And then they had another song from the Truant album called These Days, which is another catchy song that they had at the time. I kind of always judge it by how many songs I have in my Spotify or my iTunes, and with these guys, maybe 3 or 4 tracks max. So this was the first time I ever really listened to any of their albums. This is the first time I listened to a full Alien Ant Farm album. And actually, when I was doing some research for this episode, I found out that the Truant album was produced by the DeLeo brothers from Stone Temple Pilots, which I found was pretty cool because we talked about them a couple of weeks ago here on the show. So I thought that was really cool. But the thing with Alien Ant Farm is I actually am a fan of a lot of the other bands of that period. A lot of people consider bands like Papa Roach and Alien Ant Farm and maybe like, even with Limp Bizkit being very much of that era back in the early 2000s. Like you don't really listen to a lot of those bands as much anymore, but I really like the new Papa Roach album. I thought that was really good. But with Alien Ant Farm, I don't really consider them to be great songwriters by any stretch. Their most famous track is a cover song. They have a couple of other hits outside of that, but I just never really considered them to be super strong songwriters. And when I was first listening to this album, I really didn't feel like, they're a good band and they're doing a good job performing and doing their thing on this record. It just didn't really seem like a really strong album to me, and that these guys are really great songwriters. So that was my kind of first impression of this. So it was an interesting listen, but I didn't really feel like I wanted to listen to more Alien Ant Farm after this.
Dude, you're giving away your verdict. Almost. So yeah, so the new for me, I hadn't listened to Alien Ant Farm in a while, and I did some research. They had an album 9 years ago, and I'm like, wow, I didn't remember they had an album 9 years ago. It's a band that I just had that anthology record, but I Googled and I did my research too, and that wasn't even their first album. That was in 2001. They had a first album in 1999, and they called it Greatest Hits. I'm like, that's ballsy.
Yeah, that confused me.
I'm like, why would you name your debut record Greatest Hits? So yeah, that was interesting. So to me, this record actually I didn't know what to expect from the band. I didn't listen to a while. And to me, there's stuff I enjoyed here, and there's some stuff that I have thoughts on. But yeah, I went with it like with an open mind, because I'm sure a lot of people are gonna be like, oh, it's Alien Ant Farm. He's just going to shit on the band because it's called Is It That Bad? But no, this Is It That Bad is not only to trash bands. Like, we analyze, and that's why we put the question mark. Is it that bad? No, if not, it would be called It's Bad. But yeah, so I think it's interesting listen, and the band does sound like a lot of bands. To me, they sound like a Wish version of Hoobastank. To me, Hoobastank was a Wish version of Incubus. So Alien Ant Farm is a Wish version from Hoobastank and Incubus. So it's lower down in the food chain. But yeah, there's some interesting things in this album. So now let's go to round 2, where we're going to talk about a few tracks that we think maybe are not the best ones. So JC, what 3 tracks did you pick?
Yeah, let me start with Storm's Over. This one, I think they kind of want to get they get a little heavy, but not too heavy. They do some like acoustic guitars in the pre-chorus, and they have the chorus. They're singing like "Storm's Over, no more fighting," and it reminds me of like John Lennon's "Piece of Chance" when he's like singing that. So that one reminded me of that one, and I thought this one was a little more of a commercial and went too much in like a pop direction. So for me, I didn't like that song that much. Then there's a song, What Am I Doing? This is the one where they're playing with like these different like calypso beats, like reggae sounds. They remind me of this Mexican band called Mana. I think like Hector.
Oh my God.
Do you know them?
Of course.
Yeah,
if you're from Puerto Rico, you couldn't escape Mana.
They were big in like the late 90s. They had like a series of albums, but
I know, please don't make me remember them.
This song kind of brought back memories of Mana for some reason. But for me, I think like there's only one band that like mixes like rock and reggae like well. That's like Scorpions. They do that well, but I think it just didn't. This song didn't really work for me. And for me, the last song is the title track, Mantras. It was just weird, strange, very electronic, didn't really go anywhere. There's no melody, no rhythm. And there was some like hip hop and rap on it. And for me, it was just like, I think like a modern rap song, but it just sounded very strange and out of place. So that's it. Those are my 3.
Yeah. Good one. So what about you, Tom?
Yeah, I'm going to do mine in a slightly strange order, because I think normally I try and do them in chronological order by when they're on the album. But with this one, I had a very clear least favorite song, and it's the one that JC was literally just talking about, the title track, Mantras.
Yeah.
And I was definitely like, couldn't get into that one. Really, after a few listens, it just wasn't getting through. It was like there were 2 songs playing together at once. Was the first time I listened to it, it felt a bit like there was so many elements. It was too crowded for me to really enjoy it. And it just had that effect. It was like I was listening to 2 songs playing at the same time and not just one song. And it was like, what's really going on here? I couldn't really sort of get away from that feeling of just feeling a little bit like it's just too much going on at once for that song. That was definitely my least favorite one. And then I've got the cover, Everything She Wants, the Wham cover, which
that was a cover? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that was covered.
And I know this band almost their fame is built on a cover song. So I wondered whether this was going to be one of the, like a really good cover. It didn't really do anything for me. Not that I'm that big on the Wham song either, to be honest, on that particular song, but yeah, it didn't. And that sort of that end section of the album, that last couple of tracks, I didn't really I thought ended the album on a pretty low note. Then also the other one I didn't really dig too much was No One. Now, I thought the album actually started pretty strong, and then you got this fourth track, No One, which for me, it wasn't bad, and it's probably of the three, my three least favorites. It's probably my preferred one of those three, but it just kind of felt a bit mid to me, and there was some impacts from the other songs early on in the album, which I'll probably talk a bit more about in the final round. But yeah, those are my three: No One, Everything She Wants, and Mantras.
Okay, good ones. So what about you, Nick?
You know, it's funny that Everything She Wants is like the song. When I heard it, I was like, this one should be earlier on in the album. Like, this sounds like it could be a hit. And then it's funny, Tom says it's a Wham song. So
I didn't even know it was a Wham song.
So you're kind of, not to say Wham is the best band ever, but you're kind of judging a song that was really crafted by these pop songwriters, like, against an Alien Ant Farm album. So that explains why that song really jumped out to me. But some of the worst songs for me, Prosperous Futures for me was one of the worst songs. The thing that bothered me about this album is that they're working so hard. They're obviously playing really well. They're obviously putting a lot of work into the album. It's just the result is not anything that actually sticks in my mind. And that's always a problem when I'm reviewing records. If I'm coming away from the album and I don't have any song kind of buzzing in my head, I think that's a bad omen for any album. So Prosperous Futures was like that for me. Last Dance was one of the worst tracks on the album for me, although I do appreciate how they managed to try to work, the word ant into their album, their song titles. And
I thought that was cringy.
Yeah, it was a little bit cringy. It's I guess it works, I guess, within the confines of their band, but yeah, it feels a little bit forced.
Everything Ants.
Everything Ants. And then number one was one of the songs I didn't really dig on this album either. I found it kind of had a horrible melody. A lot of the melodies they're almost catchy, but not catchy enough for me to quite remember them. And then the guitar on this album was kind of grating on this song in particular, was grating on my nerves quite a bit too. There's some cool riffs going on, obviously, some cool drop D tuning going on, and they're trying, like I said on some of these other songs, they're trying really hard. It just doesn't seem to be having any effect, at least on me. So those would be my worst tracks.
Okay. So yeah, good pick. So that would leave me. So Mantras, I gotta pick it because that's like a horrible album closer. I don't feel even that it's like a song. It just doesn't do anything, and it's a boring way to end the album. But I'll name a different one that no one has mentioned. Glasses. I just thought that was like a bad Incubus version of Drive, but not great. So yeah, Glasses didn't do anything for me. And I thought also it's almost at the end. I agree with what Tom said. I think the end really pulls this album down because I think the first three tracks, even though Last of the Dance Ants, it's kind of cringy. It's to me, the chorus, it's stuck in my head. So I think it started well. I was actually surprised. And the other song I'm picking is What Am I Doing? And now that JC mentioned Mana, I can unhear it. So Tom and Nick, I wish you both listen to some Mana. I would recommend Oye Mi Amor.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Mana. I've seen, oh my God, I've seen them so many times. So those three songs for me were like the worst. I would say Storm's Over. It's also quite with the Storm's Over, and some of the lyrics on this record are, they're not the best ones, but they're like. But I've heard worse lyrics on this show, but yeah, they're not. I don't think anyone's gonna sit here and say, oh my God, Alien Ant Farm are the best songwriters ever. I don't think anyone's going to say that. So I picked those three tracks for the reasons I just said. So let's go to the third and final round where we give our final thoughts and maybe what we did like about the album, and we give it a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down. So JC?
Okay, I'm not sure where I want to go. I think I'm going to go thumbs down. Only because I don't think there's like enough here for me to go back to it. Now, I think oddly, like the Wham cover was probably like the only song I liked a lot. I thought it was just very catchy. And
did it wake you up before you go?
I don't know what it is about like Wham, like with these like 2000 bands like covering their material, because there was I think it was the band Seether did Careless Whisper.
Oh yeah,
It was either Seether or Seether or Solar. One of those bands. For some reason, like Wham, like that translates well into this type of music. But I and actually researched that song. They actually did that like back in 2019 before the pandemic, and they have a whole like music video with like from like Zoom. I never actually haven't watched, but anyway. So I like that song. The front half was not good, but it was okay. Like The Wrong Things, Last Dance, Fade. They were kind of catchy. Like I agree with that song Last Dance. Yeah, it does. The chorus is very catchy, sticks in your head. The song that everyone else was saying, I had it listed as number one. It's called Now One, whatever you call it. I thought they trying to sound like the band Chevelle. So that one was like, okay. But then once they start with like Storm's Over, I think that like next bunch of songs, So-Called, What Am I Doing, Prosperous Future, Glasses, those were kind of boring. Then the Wham cover was okay, and then the Mantras, the last song was really bad. So there was not enough here for me to save it. Like I almost went thumb sideways, but I'm going thumbs down for me. Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I actually I quite enjoyed this album up to a point, like up towards the end. I don't know if it's because I went in with very low expectations as well, because
Probably
really went in with low expectations here based on what I'd heard about their previous album. And given that we were doing it for this series as well, and we've recently done some absolutely horrific albums for this for this series as well, so maybe that's part of it. But I think I was just like, I was quite pleasantly surprised. I mean, I thought that as somebody that tends to look out a bit for instrumental stuff over lyrics, personally, I tend to do that and sometimes forget to think about the lyrics a bit and what's going on there too, which is probably one of these kind of albums where I actually was quite taken in by what was going on instrumentally. Like in Fade, I really liked the guitar riff from Terence Corso. Let me get his name right. I enjoyed like his guitar riffing in that track. I thought it was pretty cool. Nothing spectacular as such, but also nothing that really I felt was like, I thought it was good. I thought it was a decent track as a listening experience. Like I quite enjoyed what they were developing there. I quite liked Last Dance, as we've said, and even the opening track, actually. It's catchy.
it is.
I think Nick made a good point, though, that the melodies on this album, there's nothing that really takes you. It's more, for me, it's just an album which I found quite, like, I reckon if I listened to this loads and loads, it would tire on me quite quickly. But for given it's quite a recent release, I mean, it only came out,
Friday.
very recently. Yeah, Friday. In the relatively short space of time since then, I've still quite enjoyed it as a first impacts, kind of first impressions, and felt that it was good enough, So as a whole, I quite enjoyed it. I did fall off it completely towards the end, as you were saying, Hector. And I don't think it's amazing, but it's still a thumbs up. I think I found it, for a portion enough of the album, quite good. I actually liked Storm's Over. I wanted to say that Storm's Over. I actually really liked that one.
Storm's Over.
That might be my favorite.
Cloud. Yeah, it's quite catchy. So, what about you, Nick?
For me, I'm going to say thumbs down on this record. And that's actually really surprising for me to say, because I'm usually the guy who's defending all these old school 2000s bands and 90s bands that nobody really cares about anymore. I'm like, you should listen to the new Papa Roach album. It's really good. You should really listen to the new Limp Bizkit album. It's really good. And people are like, who still listens to these bands? And I'm always the guy.
You actually like the last Papa Roach record?
Oh yeah, Ego Trip. I thought that was a great record.
God.
Yeah, I really
go see my
that.
review. I trashed it.
Okay, well, agree to disagree, I guess. But yeah, so I'm usually the guy defending it, and when I listened to this album, I thought, okay, I'm the target market for this because I love defending old school bands that people consider to be irrelevant. So I wanted to like this album more than I actually did, but there are some tracks on here that I liked. I know, Hector, you're saying you didn't really like Glasses, but I actually really like that song. It kind of jumped out to me as being one of the better songs on the album, and I like that Wham cover again jumped out to me because it was another band's song. So the best song on the record is the one that they didn't even write. And then a lot of the tracks, like we were saying, they didn't grab me. And I hate coming out of listening to an album and not, you know, I do the Spotify test. And if I'm listening to an album on Spotify, if I like a track, I move it over to a playlist where I can keep listening to it because I really like it. And I didn't do that with any of the tracks on this album. So I found it to be a little bit disappointing. I still like those early songs from Alien Ant Farm. They still have some catchy songs in the past, but this one is a definite thumbs down for me.
Okay. So now that leaves me. So I went into this album not knowing what to expect. And like Tom, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I think there's more good, not good, but more enjoyable stuff here than really, really bad stuff. And I don't know if it's because I've listened to really bad stuff. And Nick, Prosperous Futures was my favorite track from the record. I don't know. I thought that track was really good. Yeah, I really like that track. I thought it was, I like the singing, I like the melody. I like the first album of the wrong things, Last Dance and Fate. I found the Freeze tracks when I was first listening to this, I'm like, I'm actually thinking this is not bad. But yeah, there's some tracks like towards the end, it really drops down. I'm not a Wham fan, so I thought the song was okay. But yeah, I'm actually gonna give it a thumbs up. I'm actually gonna save this one. I think is it gonna be my top 20 of the year? No. Am I going to re-listen to Alien Ant Farm all year and buy their shirts? No, I won't. But I also don't think it's that bad. And I want people to know that just because we put something here doesn't mean we're gonna trash it. I was actually more surprised by that I like this. I was thinking that I was gonna listen to this and I was gonna, oh my god, this is gonna be the worst. Like that last Papa Roach album, I remember Ego Trip. My review of that one was that they sounded like they were going through a midlife crisis because they were trying to act so hip and young. I hated that record. But to me, on this one, Alien Ant Farm just seem to be doing what they're doing, and maybe there's not a whole lot of pressure on them because who asked for this reunion? I don't think anyone was asking for this album. So I think there's more good than it. So we have 2 thumbs up and 2 thumbs down. So this album is barely saved. So it's hanging in there. So we want to know from you, Couchers, what do you think of Alien Ant Farm's Mantras? Do you even know this band? Did you know that this band was putting out a record? And if you need to comment, what tracks do you like and what tracks do you think are the worst? And also comment, would you give it a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down? Let us know. So coming up for next week for Is It That Bad? I think we're going to do a Silverchair record, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to do the album from 2007 that right now I can't remember the name of the record, but that one...
Young Modern?
Yeah, Young Modern, because Chili from Live Listen Erased said we should do that Silverchair album. So that will be next Sunday. So people, if you haven't, please subscribe to my my guest channel. You have JC Rock and Metal Reviews. He does album ranking, reviews. He gives you history. Also, Tom the Green Man. He has, he talks about shoegaze. He talks about symphonic metal. He's got the Symphonic Metal Sundays. And he also does fantasy and horror content. So subscribe to him as well. And finally, Nick, with Nick Zeno Music, he does album reviews too, a lot of rock stuff. And he also does some interview. We recently interviewed the same band recently, Scooped Up, which if you haven't heard it, great pop punk band. You should listen to Scooped Up. So, and finally, if you haven't subscribed to me, I have this series, interviews, and more things coming on the future. So until next time, people, this is Hector, the Shield on a Couch, And we'll see you next time on another episode of Is It That Bad? Thank you and goodbye.